Hello everyone. Welcome to the Artist Talks at Arts Visalia. I'd like to introduce Daniel Van Gerpen, who is here to talk about his show, Valley Overview.
Hi, thanks for coming. My name's Daniel Van Gerpen. This is my show in this room, and it's entitled Valley Overview. I'm an artist who works both in abstract representational forms, and my creative journey is intrinsically tied to the breathtaking agricultural landscapes of the Central Valley. This unique region is a constant source of inspiration for me, fueling my artistic exploration and the intersection between the tangible and the abstract. Living in the Central Valley, I have developed a deep and intimate connection with the land. I observe the yearly cycles of planting, growth, and harvest that sustain our communities and the world. This connection forms the core of my artistic practice, driving me to encapsulate the profound beauty and significance of the agricultural landscapes. I've always lived in agriculturally rich regions. I was born in South Dakota and grew up there through college. And so this is a painting I did of me when I was a child. I did this back in high school, so it's an older painting. And then this is a painting of my grandma's farm that I did back in high school as well. So it's kind of the early days that I've always grown up around agriculture and been inspired by that. And both my parents grew up on farms, and so we all summers and vacations we'd go down to grandma's house and go run around the farms and run through the fields, and we would work, pick rocks and things like that, which to my cousins was work, but to me it was fun because as a city kid it was interesting and new instead of work, and for them it was less fun because they had to do it all the time. And then growing up, I went through a bird period in high school, so I was always drawing. I was really into birds and feathers and layers and all of those things. And so this was from my first show I did. There was a craft fair in my grandma's town of about 500 people, and so at the school gym, and so I made prints of these on a copy machine. And that was my first art sale, was selling prints of these bird drawings that I'd done in high school. And so throughout growing up, encouragement was a big thing for me, and so my high school teacher was a big encouragement for me as well. She gave me different tasks and stuff. Often when their students are interested in things, they get extra homework to do and things like that. So I was allowed to use oil paints, which wasn't really allowed by the school system, and then I could spend some of my lunch times in the art room instead of the free period or whatever. So all that encouragement, and then she entered me in shows and things like that. So it was a big encouragement. And then heritage is a big role in my creative journey. So this is my grandma, where we would spend the farms. And so kind of my aerial perspective, as I look back and write these artist statements, I see these little things that pop up now and then. And growing up, we always had these aerial portraits or photographs of farms, which was a big thing. They have salesmen who go around and take pictures of all the farms and then sell them. So this was a photo that was of my grandma's farm. And then the cinnamon rolls are kind of a symbol of the creativity. And the heritage was, as I was getting older in high school, college, my grandparents were getting older, and so I wanted ways to remember them and have had their influence in my life. And so my grandma was a baker. She made pies, and cinnamon rolls was like the staple of breakfast at grandma's house. And so I wanted to learn how to make those cinnamon rolls, and so I had her teach me. Trouble is, she doesn't measure things. It's all touch, feel. It's this moist, it's this dense, it's not sticky, you put this in, it tastes like this. And so the recipe is basically useless at this point, that I had her kind of gauge what she did. And then after she died, we found stacks of recipes and cards and things like that. And there's at least 7 different cinnamon roll recipes in there, so there's really no way of knowing which way she actually made them. So it's kind of this mystery, but that's kind of a memory I have of my grandma and the creative process. And these are my parents. My mom was a hobby artist, so when she was younger, she would paint portraits and farms and things like that. And so as a kid, I had access to tools and encouragement, which I think were big factors in my artistic development. And so that was important. And my dad, also, he worked at Sears. And so as gifts, he would always buy me tools. And so I had all these craftsman tools that I've collected. And so I would start carving with wood, and then a few days later he brought me like an electric chisel set home, even though it was just something I was experimenting with and playing with for a while, and that was kind of his way to encourage me. And so then he also bought me my first miter saw, so I could build my own frames and canvases and things like that. So that was kind of his contribution to that creative process. Which also leads to creative tangents. And so I started with the miter saw, and I kind of expand like, oh, what if I have this tool, and I have this tool, and so I started doing some woodworking. So here's kind of a decorative woodworking piece that I made. And then I also had a friend who was into photography, so I got into photography as well, and so I've done some weddings and things like that. And so I've always explored all of the different areas of artistic creation. And throughout the journey, sketchbook has always been an important tool of mine, both for expressing ideas and also it's kind of a diary of just emptying your mind and putting it down on paper is a good way to just kind of get all these ideas out. And nothing may come of it, but it's a good thing to go back. I kind of look at themes of things that I've gone through that I've been maybe subconsciously thinking about. And so trees was one of the things that came out of that. So I went through what I call a tree portraiture period. So I did a lot of paintings of trees and rivers and things like that. So that was kind of a time in my life that I went through. And so it's always been a good practice for me to keep the sketchbook going and just throw out ideas and kind of look at and examine what's coming out of that. And then this was, I think, looking back through my photos, I think this is my first, what I would call aerial perspective painting. This was inspired by, I was living in Salinas at the time, in Monterey County area, and there's kind of a hiking trail on the edge of town, and you look down and see the Salinas River and the hills and such. And so I was really inspired by that perspective, and this is kind of the first instance that I recall of that kind of coming up in my paintings and my artwork. And then I met my now wife online. So I was living in Salinas, she was living in Fresno. We met online dating, and this was our first date. She nervously asked if we could take a picture, and really thankful that she did at this point because now we have this memory of our first date down in Monterey. So that was a lot of fun. So then I ended up moving to Fresno, and we started a family, and there's always kids around now that we have our two boys, and they love to create and make big messes and things like that. And so there's a few of these paintings that on the backside you can see where my kids have painted because there's brush marks and drawings and things like that. So I try to keep them, if they're at that level, to keep them turned around so that they don't destroy the front of them. But like Picasso said, it took me 4 years to paint like Raphael, but a lifetime to paint like a child. So sometimes I use my kids as inspiration and starter for things. And so they give my kid a pencil or charcoal or whatever. And then one of the things that my sister and I used to do when we were kids on long car drives is we would make marks on a paper and then swap them. And then we'd have to try to make something recognizable out of that chicken scratch. And so it's kind of a fun game that we played. So I've been playing that with my kids sometimes too. And so this was one that he did. And then I ended up making this painting from that marks that I think he was maybe 1 or 2 at the time. So it was a fun little brain exercise to try to work something out from what they're doing. And then my work ranges from representational to abstract. And so with the abstract things, sometimes what I do is I just paint straight from the tube. Just use that as sort of a marker or drawing utensil. It's really tangible and creates really, really thick layers. And this is the finished painting there. So my representational art celebrates the tangible. My abstract pieces dive deeper into the emotional and conceptual aspects of the Central Valley's agriculture. These works explore the ever-changing rhythms of growth, life, and decay. The abstract allows me to convey the visceral sensations, the hidden stories of land, and the connections between the earth and those who nurture it. Central to my artistic narrative is a celebration of the harmonious coexistence between nature and human endeavor. The Central Valley is an agricultural marvel, and my paintings aim to portray the intricate dance between the meticulous cultivation of orchards and the meandering grace of the rivers. It's a story of balance, interdependence, and the essential role of agriculture in our lives. One of the great comments that I got from one of my kind of acquaintance friends is that you paint like John Steinbeck. And that really struck me as that. So Salinas was a big influence in my life too, and so painting like Steinbeck was a great compliment to me to try to tell the story of the people and the land and the agriculture that's there. So that's a great thing. So with every stroke and composition, I aim to infuse a sense of poeticism into these landscapes. It's not merely about depicting what the eye can see, but also what the heart can feel. The majesty of the Central Valley from above is a symphony of emotions, and I invite viewers to join me in this poetic exploration. Through these aerial portraits, I pay homage to the land that sustains us, the hands that cultivate it, and the fragile balance that binds us all. I invite you to soar with me through the Central Valley skies, where the agricultural heart beats in harmony with the earth itself. Contemplate the beauty, complexity, and fragility of this remarkable landscape. I want to thank you all for coming and sharing in this journey and exploration. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those, or if you have those later, I can speak to them. I don't. My day job is a graphic design, so I work for a software company. Graphic design is my day job, and then this is my business side job. Sometimes it's full-time too, but especially when there's shows. Yeah, so it's a creative process too, yeah.
You say you start with the paint itself. Some of these look like you must have had some idea of the sketch first. You actually do a sketch, or do you work straight from your palette or the tube?
I don't have a solid kind of process. Some of them start from photographs. Like this one is this is from a photograph. This is east of Fresno at sunrise. And so this started from a photograph, and then I had a sketch and worked it out. Whereas, say, this one started with just charcoal, making lines, and then I started making kind of converging lines, figuring out where the perspective is, and then slapping paint on, and then layering and things like that, scraping off and adding. So it's kind of...
You start with a blank canvas, and then work with your palette, for example, from the photograph?
Yeah.
You start from the corner and work down, or do you
I work all over.
work on
Yeah, it's a big mess, and then I try to make sense of it. It's kind of like Michelangelo said with the David, he has a big marble, and he takes away everything that's not the David, so it's like this creative process of adding and subtracting. For me, painting is sculptural, so it's about adding and subtracting, erasing, painting over, scratching. I even use like a paint scraper and scrape things off just to get texture. Yeah.
Use a drone photographs, or how do you get these scenes?
Yeah, I use a drone. I've done low-level flights over the valley. I've used Google Earth for some inspiration, but I also have a drone that I fly. Yeah, my son was an early riser, so I did a whole series of sunrise paintings, and so some of these are. So it's kind of a double meaning, that going from an aerial perspective, rising, and also he got up early, so we would go to keep mom and his brother to be able to keep sleeping. We'd go for drives, and I'd set the drone up and take some photographs to get some inspiration.
Do you ever do anything all in air?
I do, yeah. It's harder to get the aerial perspective in plein air, but
Yeah, flying the drone and painting
Yeah.
at the same time seems awkward.
yeah. But for me, it's a valuable practice that I want to do more, and I try to find edge. Like I go up the 180 from Fresno, and there's a few spots that have some lookouts there, and so I try to look for those spots. And because I find when I do plein air, light and color is much more natural to observe that way. So it's a valuable practice that I try to do as much as I can.
And about how many hours do you think you get to work per week on painting?
It's it's probably between 10 and 40. Yeah.
Okay.
Like when I have shows coming up, it definitely escalates, but I try to do something every day, whether it's painting or drawing, just to kind of keep that going. There's a quote I said, it's like people overestimate what they can do in a day, but they underestimate what they can do in a year. And so just keeping that 15, 20, maybe an hour after the kids go to bed, practice. People say, like, you paint so much. I'm like, yeah, I don't paint huge blocks of time, but I try to find 30 minutes or an hour. If you do that every day, at the end of the year, you've worked equivalent to like an 8-hour work week or something like that of working every day, so. Yeah.
I noticed that your the textures, the application of paint is at different depths. Do you work with multiple brushes? Do you use a palette knife? How do you choose to apply the paint?
Yeah, I use brushes. It's like these are all brush, and then this is paint scraper and a squeegee and palette knives and whatever tools I can find, yeah. A lot of construction tools. I probably have as many construction tools in my studio as I do proper paint tools.
So your color selection, you bright blue on the two pieces and everything is kind of dim. Is it a mood thing? Is it?
Yeah, it's mood and kind of time of day, and so in the kind of golden hours, the light will change and the reflections change, and I love the reflections off the river and canals and just the different moods that those create.
What are you most creative?
When?
Or what time of day?
Oh, what time of day? Unusual for artists, but I prefer to work in the mornings. Even in college, I would get up at 7 and go to the art studio, primarily because I would be the only one in there, because most artists sleep till 10, especially college students. So I found if I go in at 7 and work till 9 or 10 when classes start, I don't have to compete with other people's music or things like that. It's quiet. There's no interruptions, and so that's actually 2 hours of work period instead of 2 hours of chatting with other people. So as an introvert too, that was valuable for me to just go in and work. And my kid gets up early, so now I have to distract him. He used to for a while he would sit in the crib while I painted and things like that, so I was just trying to find those times.
How old are your kids now?
They're 5 and 7 now.
Is it slightly easier?
It's a little bit easier. Their
to
attention span,
sometime?
their attention span's a little bit better, and their restraint of touching everything is a little bit better.
I love it, seeing the pictures of just setting them up with their own stuff.
Yeah,
That's the best
it's a
way
way to distract them from touching my things.
There's one more question. I noticed there are different canvas sizes.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious if you start with an image in mind and then pick the canvas, or do you have the canvas and then you look for the image that you think that will best be expressed?
My painting instructor in college said, make your canvas fit your idea, don't make your idea fit your canvas. So we were kind of trained to have the idea and composition sketched out before. So usually it's kind of make the idea fit the canvas. But there's also ones, like more abstract ones, I'll just start making marks. So it doesn't really matter what size or aspect ratio the canvas is.
Behind, for example, wouldn't work vertically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any favorites?
I say they're like my children. I love them all, and they all frustrate me at times.
That is true.
Yeah, so there's some that are near and dear to me. Usually when my wife falls in love with one, that's usually the next one to sell. So I'm like, why can't you love them all so that they all sell?
I hope she got to pick a few of her favorites, though. That
Yeah,
is
she's,
still
yeah,
Oh, good.
yeah.
You
There's-
should get in a group where she likes several in a row, and you have like, I mean, I know, I've sold paintings, and I had like a 2-year period where I kept just selling, and then it just started drying up, and it's like, what causes that? I thought a lot of it was, for me, was self-promotion.
Yeah.
Showing everybody my artwork.
Yeah.
But do you have times like that where things are really hopping, and then times where, things slow
It kind of comes in waves, yeah. I think the economy is a big influencer of that. I find like April to May, June is a good time, and then the holiday season. Because you got people get their tax returns, and then holiday timing. Those are kind of my better selling times of the year.
You did pretty good this one.
Yeah, that was a good show.
So one thing I've noticed is that subject-wise, you have this kind of natural waterway contrasting with the squares of ag, but you also have this interesting contrast with how you work. You have a very relatable subject matter about, we all know, we live here, we experience it every day. Each piece, a lot of I hung the show, so I got to see the actual kids' artwork behind it. So each
Yeah.
piece of it has these very intimate family connections to you, so there's this contrast between general relatability to everyone with these really intimate moments for you and your family. It's these like extreme contrast is something that you really like to play with in your artwork or in your life in general. You find yourself working with all of those kind of heavy contrasting themes.
Yeah, I think contrast is interesting to me. I think part of it's I'm like, right brain, left brain. I'm 50-50. So I like order, but I also like chaos. And so for me, kind of the mixing of the agricultural landscape with the straight lines and rows, mixing with the river, just is really interesting to me, and how that the river breaks it up. And same thing with contrast, like high contrast. I like high contrast lighting. It creates an interesting, so it's kind of an abstract shape, but as you enter more into the painting, you get more details of the surrounding landscape as well.
And that one is so interesting too, with much less contrast.
Yeah,
And it just kind of looks like when we have a really dusty, dirty air day in the valley.
yeah. All that fresh air. Yeah.
But it's so beautiful like that.
Yeah, and I love exploring the abstract and the representational. And for me, I kind of have that internal conflict of like trying to find a defined style. So I think part of it, finding this niche subject matter helps connect those. And so you have these more abstract things that are pretty, like this back one over here with the green is pretty abstract. And by itself, it's just an abstract painting, but you put it next to a painting with fields, and there's that line that connects those things and makes it interesting to me.
Any more questions or comments for Daniel?
Do you use only wood, or do you use different mediums?
I use different mediums. Some are acrylic. These are acrylic and mixed media, so there's some Lear crayons and charcoal and things like that. So different mark making tools. And then this one's oil. So it's kind of I like acrylic so I can do lots of thick layers quickly. It's kind of part of it. But I love the richness and textures of oils too. So I enjoy
Ever tried a lot of waste oils?
a little bit. I didn't really get into it.
I just did oils for a long
Yeah.
time. Did watercolors the last 5 years, and now I'm just going back to my drawing because I like those
Yeah.
colored pencils and
Yeah.
tone paper. That's my thing.
Yeah.
I just gravitate towards where what makes you happy.
Yeah. What you enjoy. Yeah.
That's neat.
Do you have a full studio at home to work in?
We have like an office that is part my office. I work from home and then part studio. So when the shutdown happened, I had to bring my office home. So it's a twofer.
Any last comments?
And one last question. Particularly when you work with oil, it will take time to dry. Do you work on multiple pieces at a time, or one and wait?
Yeah, I usually have multiple pieces going at once. My studio right now, I have one down here and then one up here and then one over that's drying. And so yeah, often 3 or 4 going on at the same time.
That's pretty typical with a lot of artists. I remember I used to admire Robert Bateman, the Canadian. And he said he'd have all kinds of paintings going at the same time.
Yeah.
Several of them. Just, wow, how do you focus on making this the best one, but it's all just bits
Yeah.
and pieces.
For me, it keeps it fresh too, because sometimes you get too focused on something, you kind of lose the forest for the trees and you get too lost in it. So it's good to take a break, and sometimes I'll turn stuff around and not look at it for a couple of weeks and then come back at it with fresh eyes.
It's always good to stare at what you've done so far. Just sit there and look at it and
Yeah.
critique yourself.
Yeah.
I'm aware of artists, for example, when it comes to a difficult point in a painting, sometimes he actually would look upside down. He would just flip the canvas, because the perspective wasn't right.
Yeah.
And he could improve it by just changing
Yeah.
his viewpoint.
Yeah. A lot of people use mirrors too, so they'll look at it, so you'll see a mirror reflection. Another advice I got was break your painting at the end of your painting session. So do something that makes the painting not work so that you have to come back to it and fix it. That's a good way to start. Because sometimes if it's something's close to being finished, when you come back to it, it's harder to kind of break what's there. So try to break it when you're done, so that when you come back to it, you're forced to kind of jump in and keep going.
That's your kid's job, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, they do that sometimes. Yeah, I did another show in Hanford a couple months ago, and during the reception, one of my friends came over and said, "Did you notice there's a Frosty the Snowman on your painting?" So in the middle of one of my paintings, he had taken a rubber stamp, and there's a red Frosty the Snowman. It's very faint, And I was able to rub it off, thankfully, but right in the middle there's a Frosty the Snowman.
That was one of my questions. Do your kids help you paint? Apparently they do.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes they help, yeah.
So does a painting talk to you when it's done, or is your work never really done?
I kind of equate it to Subway. So there's kind of, a painting is never, you could always keep painting stuff. And so there's kind of, for me, there's like Subway stops where I get to a point that this is a stopping point. It could be finished here or I could keep going. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad to keep going. And in my perspective is that it's okay if you break it because you can always paint another one. That's always been my perspective, is that trying to hold your painting too perfectly, thinking it's a perfect thing, kind of hinders you from progressing to where you're going. Like this one is painted over maybe 3 times because I got to a point I'm like, oh, it's done. And then I just made big scrapes and then it ended up this much more visceral and textural painting. Yeah. And so it was kind of this safe thing that was it kind of worked. It could have worked, but I'm glad that I kept going and kept, because it made a much better painting, which doesn't always happen. Sometimes it ruins it, and then I have to, but I can pull off the canvas and start over, or just keep going. All right, thank you.
Excellent.